Hello and greetings fellow gamers, I'm Benjamin, and today we are starting a brand new series, Battlefield Middle-earth. In this series, we'll be talking about battlefield tactics that will hopefully allow your merry band of adventurers to overcome foes who would otherwise outclass you. So today, we will be discussing defeat in detail tactics, which are, frankly, my favourite tactics. At its core, defeat in detail is about bringing your entire force to bear against a portion of the enemy force, overwhelming and destroying it. Then you repeat this until eventually the entire enemy force is destroyed. Really, this is the core of most dungeon crawls. If you fought all the inhabitants of a dungeon at once, you would definitely lose. But taking it one room at a time means you're in with a good chance of winning. But that's on a strategic level. Let's talk tactics. Defeat in detail tactics rely on coordination of the adventuring party's actions, with some of the party acting to control the fight, while the rest engage and destroy enemy elements by ganging up on them. The exact details depend on the rule set and genre, of course, but let's look at some basics. Smoke. Be it obscuring mist, a smoke stick, or a smoke grenade, deploying a cloud of concealing thick smoke is available to most adventuring parties, even if they lack casters. Smoke is an incredibly flexible tool. It can be used offensively to remove enemy range options. It can be used defensively to cover an advance or a retreat. It can be used as a distraction or as a signal. So, how does this fit into defeat in detail? Firstly, using smoke offensively. In most systems, dropping smoke on an enemy back line, their casters and their archers, significantly defangs them. It gives them penalties to hit with their attacks, often significant penalties, and on top of that, it can result in them targeting the wrong place entirely and automatically missing. As a result, while they are in the smoke, enemy ranged combatants can be more or less ignored until they find their way out. As these elements tend to be high damage components of an enemy's force, this allows the team to focus on enemy screening elements, their melee fighters, with virtual impunity. In a confined space, such as a corridor or alleyway, smoke used offensively like this can force the enemy to either disengage and regroup, or come towards you, with both results being favourable to you tactically. If they disengage, that leaves their melee forces without support and allows you to eliminate or rout those forces without being under fire from the enemy ranged elements. If they rout, then you can probably get some free hits as they disengage, or failing that, you can attempt to overrun them by pursuing. Defensively, smoke is used to cover disengaging from an unfavourable fight. Whenever possible, you should avoid fights that you are likely to lose, or at least fights that give the enemy a tactical advantage. Smoke allows you to withdraw with less risk of taking unwanted enemy fire due to your heavy concealment, which can cover both a full retreat and scatter and hide tactics. It also allows for a feigned retreat, pretending to rout, but when the enemy follows to press their advantage, you ambush them when they leave the smoke. Smoke can also be used to cover an advance. While this isn't ideal, as it does leave you somewhat blind, if the enemy has range superiority, then charging through smoke is significantly better than charging over open ground. As a distraction, smoke is best combined with some form of sound, be it magical illusions or a Bluetooth speaker. The goal here is to make it appear that you are advancing under smoke from one direction, while your real force advances from a different direction. This can also be used to trigger ambushes or waste enemy ammunition. Since the enemy probably cannot accurately target in smoke, they will likely opt for a spray and pray approach, filling the smoke with so much lead that it cannot miss. If they do this, you simply wait for them to run out of bullets before you leave cover in advance, with your smoke still covering your advance just in case they're not as out as you thought. Again, ranged elements who cannot effectively engage can be considered to be under control for the purposes of defeat in detail. Smoke is best when it's something you can see through but your enemies cannot, an effect that can be accomplished with specialised equipment or magic, or even using an illusion of smoke that your friends know is an illusion but your enemies do not. In this situation, consider smoke to be a general offensive debuff for the enemy and use it whenever practical. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, the Warlock invocation Misty Visions is an ideal tool for this, as it is an unlimited use area illusion. Now we're on to single-use mobility inhibitors, hold person, tanglefoot bags, glue grenades, net and bolus launchers. There are plenty of magical and mundane options here. The key feature is that these hit one or more targets and prevent them from moving until they break free or the attack wears off, without creating a long-term battlefield control effect. These are always used on the enemy, unlike smoke, which can be used on the party or even on empty space for various effects. For defeat in detail, the primary uses of these weapons are to negate screening and to force engagements. Screening is when the enemy force's melee elements intercept your forces en route to the enemy's ranged and caster elements. By cutting the melee force's mobility, you effectively remove them as a threat, as they are only able to engage effectively in melee, and if they cannot move to engage, they can be considered neutralized, at least temporarily. This allows your melee elements to bypass them completely and engage the high damage, low durability elements that would normally be hiding behind the melee forces, tying them up and negating their ability to effectively deal damage. The other use of these weapons and spells is to force enemies that don't want to fight into combat. This includes skirmishers using hit and run tactics, and foes attempting to flee. By negating the enemy's mobility advantage, you can then bring your forces to bear against these elusive targets, allowing you to eliminate them before they can regain their momentum. The second form of mobility limiters are long-term area effects that make an area difficult to move through. This includes spells like Grease or Entangle, or mundane tricks like covering the floor in oil or cantrips. If the enemy can be forced to advance through the mobility limiting effect, then their advance is slowed and can often be temporarily halted with a poor check. These can be used both offensively and defensively. Offensively, forcing enemy melee elements to come to you through a limiter gives additional time for your ranged team members to engage them before they can damage your party. If the effect has a chance of delaying them for a second, such as with Grease causing them to slip and go prone, or Entangle grabbing them, this often means that instead of all the enemy melee elements arriving at once, they will come to you in a trickle, allowing your melee specialists to gang up on the enemy before his allies can arrive to help. Alternatively, this can be used to slow an enemy retreat, giving your team time to shoot fleeing enemies in the back. It's not honourable, but it is a very effective way to make sure they won't sound alarms or come back later. Defensively, these tools can be used to slow enemy pursuit, thus allowing you to break contact with a lower risk of being punished for it. Finally, let's talk about physical barriers. Walls. This is where the real game begins. Normally, walls on the battlefield are something that can only be accomplished with magic, but some advanced technology can create force fields with a similar tactical role. Walls have a ton of uses on the battlefield, being able to act as cover, slow pursuit, and prevent enemies fleeing. However, its primary tactical use during defeat in detail is to physically divide the enemy force, allowing the party to defeat one portion of the enemy's troops before moving on to the next one. The ability to prevent one portion of the enemy's forces from joining the fight cannot be overstated in value, making this one of the most tactical useful of any force multiplier. So, in summation, engage a small force of enemies with the larger force of yours as possible. divide them so they are forced to fight alone, use smoke to defeat ranged attackers, mobility inhibitors to cripple melee attackers, and walls to cut the enemy off from their allies. Hopefully this video has helped you with your party tactics, or if you're a GM, has given you some ideas for next time you're having an enemy that's supposed to be a tactical genius fight the party. If you found it helpful, please leave a like and a comment. Also, check out my Patreon for bonus content such as art and games. Link in the description. Stay safe and have fun.